Hi guys! So you might be familiar with a short series I've done on my channel in the past, which is young adult to adult book recommendations, in which I take a young adult title and recommend an adult title I think you'll like based on the young adult book, and vice versa. So if you obviously enjoy the adult book, you might enjoy the young adult book. I thought I'd take that concept, which I've done twice in the past and you can check out, I'll link down below, and turn it into something slightly different by taking contemporary, modern novels written in the past couple of decades and recommending you a classic. In this first instalment, I'd say my dates are pretty loose. My modern novels come from the 1990s onwards, and my classics are from no later than the 1960s. I do have a couple of modern classics to mention in this video and one slightly earlier work. But if you like this video, then I'm more than happy to do it again in the future and see if I can come up with some other recommendations for you. I think this will hopefully be a fun way to give some of you suggestions of where to start with slightly older literature if you're interested, or just give those of you who are looking for a new read and like some of the books I'm comparing other books to, you might just find a new recommendation. But without further ado, let's get into the video, shall we? Now the first recommendation begins with a book that is the only book I have a physical copy of in this video, and that is Bitterroot Hook by Janet Ellis. This is my modern novel. This one came out only a couple of years ago, in fact, so I think it's the most recent book out of the ones I'm going to talk about. It is, however, set in the 1700s in London and follows our protagonist Anne, who has grown up in quite a wealthy household, but her father is quite dispassionate. Her little brother died and that affected the whole family, and her mother is constantly having miscarriages or having stillborn babies, and it's just quite a tense, not very loving household. And her father wants to marry her off to a man that Anne certainly doesn't want to be married to. She instead falls in love with the butcher's boy. Now, this isn't a straightforward period romance. This is quite a dark novel, and from the beginning Anne has some slightly strange proclivities. She's interested in slightly darker topics, and she keeps dead animal bones, and she's just a little bit on the dark side, and that goes towards her fascination with the butcher's boy and his job, but she is consumed with those feelings, and our relationship begins, and then some quite turbulent things happen across the plot of the novel. Really enjoyed this book, and it struck me very early on how much it reminded me of, although it's not exactly the same, it conjured up similar feelings for me, to Thérèse Racan by Émile Zola. So this is my classic recommendation. This book was written and published in the 1800s and was originally written in French, but of course I read it in English. It follows two main characters really, one of whom is married to a man that she doesn't love. It's her cousin. She sees him as quite a weak character, and she just does not enjoy being married to him, but was kind of pressured into it by her aunt, who is his mother, who also raised her, and thought it would be convenient for the two to get married and help with the inheritance. Then there is one of her husband's friends who is quite self-indulgent and self-obsessed and has very little care for others around him. They're both quite dark, often unlikable characters, and this passionate obsession with one another leads them down some very dark paths. So I think if you like either of these books, then you will probably like the other. They really conjured up similar experiences as a reader for me. My next contemporary recommendation is White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi. This again came out a few years ago, still in the 21st century, and is a literary, I wouldn't say horror novel, but quite unsettling novel. And it follows a few different characters, but the central character is a daughter in a long line of women who it seems as though possessed some sort of witchly powers. They all had the same disease as well that made them eat things that contain no nutrition. They're not actually food, you know, like cotton wool or wood, that kind of thing. But there's this lingering sense of magic over them as well, which is emphasised by the house that she grows up in. This house, in fact, narrates some of the chapters and is the most creepy thing ever. The house is very possessive over this girl and was over her mother and grandmother as well. And it really doesn't want these women to leave its premises, and it really mixes reality and magic realism, and you don't always know what's going on and what's real and what isn't, and what's lurking behind the scenes, and it's a really wonderful, unsettling novel and really beautifully written as well. Now, the book I would recommend you to read if you enjoyed this book, or vice versa, is a book from the late 1950s, and that is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. And yes, my main premise for recommending this book is the fact that it also possesses a sort of creepy haunted house. But I mean, that's good enough for me. Again, this follows a female main character who goes to join a group of other people who are staying in this house as part of an experiment to see if it's haunted. A scientist wants to conduct an experiment, and he wants to involve people who have had paranormal experiences as children and bring them all together in this house and see what happens. And things escalate from there. Again, there is a sense of what's real, what isn't real when you're reading this book. Lots of secrets to uncover, so I would recommend that one. And lastly is a book from the 1990s, so actually the latest contemporary book I'm going to mention here, and that is The Dumb House by John Burnside. You've probably heard me mention this book before. I have a whole review of it, which I'll link down below if you're interested. And this is a story about a man who has a weird obsession with the original language and the innateness of soul. Are those two things tied together? And essentially humanity. But he has some weird ways of going about finding out what the answers to his questions are. He starts off young, experimenting on animals, and things go further as he gets older and pulls new people into his experiment, until it comes to a point where he raises his own children in isolation to see if they come up with their own language, and that's mentioned right at the beginning of the book, and then we go back into the past, so that's not a spoiler. Super creepy, very dark, quite violent in parts, but really wonderfully written and really makes you think, and it's just enthralling as a novel. And the book I would recommend for you if you enjoyed The Dumb House would be The Collector by John Fowles. This is from the 1960s, so there isn't actually a massive gap between these two books, about 30 years. But I'd say the 1960s still falls into the category of modern classic, and John Fowles' Collector is very much the quintessential stalker story. Again, it follows a male main character who is slightly disassociated from the people around him. He sees things very differently. He considers himself to be very unique and special, but he develops an obsession with a girl that lives down the street from him as a young adult. Initially, he doesn't plan to do anything about this, but then he wins a large sum of money, and he can't think what to do with it, so he buys a house in an incredibly rural area, far off from any other homes, and then decides to get the basement remodeled. And every step he doesn't think he's going to go any further until the point that he does, and he kidnaps this woman. And the book is actually told in two parts, one from his perspective, and then in the second half it's told from her perspective, so you get the same events but from very different people's eyes. Again, dark and horrendous, but an incredibly interesting character study and very well written, and just both books, I imagine if you like one you'll like the other. Those are my contemporary to classic recommendations for this video though. I would be more than happy to do another one of these if you are interested. Same goes for YA to adult. I've been meaning to do another one of those for a while, so let me know if that interests you. And let me know if you have read or plan on reading any of the books in this video. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time guys, happy reading, and I'll see you again soon. Bye!